in Senegal up until about 5 or 6 years ago, when they had the common sense to fire him. All right, now, my main point, I'm trying to show that before Ghana, a nation existed in the southern area that became the Sahara before Ghana. And this is the preface for Ghana. And all this activity was taking place when the Romans were in retreat. And as the Romans were in retreat, this is 300 years before the Roman retreat. And that all this activity in this part of Africa is unfolding as the preface to the beginning of the state of Ghana, and that Egypt, while in decline, is not exactly Egypt, because this is the country that the Greeks would later call Egypt. And that the ancient Egyptians never called that country Egypt. They called it Tamari, Kemet, Egyptus, and the word Egypt came from the word Egyptus, called by the Greeks. But now, as Egypt began to decline, and as the Roman period came to an end, and as Islam and the Arabs began to push the Europeans out of North Africa, the rebirth of a new civilization began to occur in the valley of the Niger. But the activity that I've been alluding to occurred 300 years before the Roman decline, 300 years before the birth of Islam. But with the birth of Islam, Ghana as a state in the Western Sudan had already occurred and was a flourishing state at the time. Now, as they pushed themselves, meaning the Arabs and the Berbers and the Africans, as they pushed themselves into the Mediterranean and into Spain, the activity in Ghana is beginning to take place. Now, the history of Ghana is told in many ways. And the first history comes from a Spanish Arab, Il Fasan, and his history is called Roads and Ruins. Now, the curiosity about Ghana has reached Europe. And when it reached Europe, an Italian king named Raja has an Arab to write a book about this curious country, because it is called the Gold Country. Ghana stands astride the gold producing area in West Africa, and the roads from the Sahara into the gold country. And because they are the masters of the gold country, and anyone coming into the gold country must go through Ghana and pay a tariff, and they are rich, and they have kings who command the gold country, and they have a standing army of great consequence. They become known to Europe of that day, and everyone is curious because they cannot get into the gold country, and everybody wants their wealth, and no armies can penetrate this country. So now this king hires an Arab to go into the country to see if he can penetrate it, but this Arab has already gone into the country and hasn't been able to take out anything. But this Italian king named Raja hires him to write a geography book explaining the country. And he writes this geography book and he calls it the Book of Raja. As kings then who wanted information hired people to write books especially for them. Now you have the second book explaining ancient Ghana in the Western Sudan, in the states bordering on the Sahara, to the people of Europe. The third book is written by another Tunisian Arab, El Omari. All right, now, they learn later that Fulanis are living on the border of the country, and because of the poor translation of a word called loco, the assumption is that the country is ruled by whites. And many black scholars who are too lazy to do their homework, including John Hope Franklin, he says the country originally was ruled by white kings. Now the word loco, because they said the country was ruled by loco Ethiopians, the word loco meant alabaster then at one time, but it meant foreign Ethiopians. Now if you do your homework, you will discover that these foreign Ethiopians were Africans who came from outside of the area. Now you've got to do your homework and do your anthropology. You've got to study African customs to get at the heart of it. Foreign Ethiopians means Africans who came from outside of the area. If you understand your cultural anthropology, you will understand something else. In Africa of that day, and sometime in this day, royalty is interchangeable. If you're royal in one place, you can be royal in another place. If there's a weak royal system in one place, if a strong king shows up and wants the job, he can get the job. So some people invaded from the Volta River, people called the Musis, still in existence. And they invaded ancient Ghana in the 3rd century. They took over the kingship. In the period from the 3rd century to 770 is called the period of the Musi dynasty. There's a little book in paperback by Adu Bowen, a Ghanaian writer, called Topics in West African History. He explains this. There's another book, African Glory. There's at least 10 books when all this is explained. The period of the Musi dynasty is noted for quite a few interesting things we have to look at. Arabs came down into ancient Ghana and lived in peace along with their religion that was at odds with African religions, which proved